and I'm only saying it now because he was so mean. No, because
Maybe
he
he
was
knew
like,
about that all along and he finally
maybe
got
maybe
you
that
on
is
his
that maybe
podcast.
he figured that out, and that was the motivation. Mind you, this is a guy who couldn't remember the name of the director or the hotel he stayed at, so I wouldn't bet on it. But anyway, maybe that's it. Oh, there's one other thing that happened on Dragon Squad, and this is maybe this is a lesson for producers, kind of like figuring out how to be a problem solver, and which I think is something Bruce Lee used to say, and I think it's really true. The requirement, the mindset of a producer is that you try not to be a problem creator, but a problem solver.
Mhm.
So Michael had shot the movie. He'd been great in the film. He'd done the action, he'd done the acting, and he'd been and as he says in his podcast, he and I had become friendly, and Daniel greatly admired him, and I think we had it was from my perspective, we certainly had a good experience with him, and I think apart from the brutal long hours, I think he felt respected and taken care of, when
Sure.
we made the film. Anyway, so we got to the end, and there was one of these ridiculous en passe, which was the production company wanted him to sign some document before he filmed his last day. And he was saying he was not going to sign it until after he filmed his last day. I'm trying to remember how it worked out, but basically that we were stuck in that he wasn't going to shoot his last day. Maybe it was the balance payment or something, and then the balance payment wasn't coming unless he signed the document. But he wasn't going to do that because anyway, he was worried maybe I shoot the last day and then they don't pay me, and then So I've got the production company in my ear. You got to get him to sign. You got to get him to sign. And Michael and the others, I ain't signing. Sod this. I know the way that these offshore companies work. So anyway, so we were stuck. We had to shoot the scene. So I said, "Can you give me the document?" And bless them, the document was all in Chinese. So I kind of folded it and I took it to Michael. I said, "A friend of mine's a huge fan of yours. Would you mind just signing this?" And so he signs Michael Biehn. And I unfolded the paper and he goes, "What's all this?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. It's all I could find." And then I took it back. There he is. And I gave it to the guy. And to be fair, and I talk about this in my book, I always felt guilty about that until today. Now I couldn't care less. But I always felt bad because from my understanding of Yihei, you don't lie to your brothers. You don't. In that instance, I guess it was a white lie because I was trying to get past that. I knew the company was going to pay him, right? So
Yeah,
that
he did
film
get
his
paid, and the
last scene.
producer has to make sure the film gets shot and completed by a
I know,
specific time.
but it was a
But
kind of
yeah, I'd feel
tactic
bad too.
I don't like to do, and I'm only saying it now because he was so mean. No, because
Maybe
he
he
was
knew
like,
about that all along and he finally
maybe
got
maybe
you
that
on
is
his
that maybe
podcast.
he figured that out, and that was the motivation. Mind you, this is a guy who couldn't remember the name of the director or the hotel he stayed at, so I wouldn't bet on it. But anyway, maybe that's it. But anyway, so as I felt less bad after I heard what he was saying about me. So that was that, and I think that's pretty much the major things that happened during the production of Dragon Squad. Right after that, well, there's one other funny story, which is that at the end of Dragon Squad, Daniel Lee said to me and Maggie, you two are really talented and you've never quite fulfilled your potential. And the reason is because your Chinese names are not lucky enough. But luckily, Daniel Lee, am very good at doing the Chinese art of finding a good name for somebody because you find the year somebody's born, the time they were born, and you give them a Chinese name. And so Maggie and I are like, oh, okay, what are we going to do? We're nothing to lose, I guess. So we went to the office and he kind of did his, hocus pocus thing and then gave us these two new Chinese names. And we got in the lift and I put mine in my pocket and I think Maggie put it in hers and we're looking at each other. Do you believe this? Do you believe this? I don't know. Do we believe this? And then within a week, I got offered job as the vice president for Asia for Miramax, and which was a big gig at the time.
Sure.
And Maggie got offered Mission Impossible. By the
Mhm.
way, I think her name was significantly luckier than mine because she got Mission Impossible. And I still had a good run producing and buying films and doing all the stuff that we did with Miramax. But the other weird footnote to this was when I joined Miramax, one of my jobs was to acquire Asian action films. And the first question my bosses said to me is, "Do you know any recent films?" I said, "This is a great movie called Dragon Squad." So again, ended up I kind of sold it to myself, but that was fine. It was good. And then we released that. It did very well. It was like we had a label, Dragon Dynasty. I think it was second or third. We retitled. It wasn't my decision. It was retitled Dragon Heat. I think maybe there was another movie called Dragon Squad, but it was Dragon Heat
Okay.
in America. So that was that. So then we move on to the main crux, I think, of Michael's dissatisfaction was when um, I had uh, kept in mind the idea that I wanted to do a movie like a crossover action film with a established American or international white guy lead and an Asian fighting girl. I just had this image in my mind that this would be
Mhm.
kind of fun to do. And the first inkling of it, this first incarnation of it was my dear late friend Richard Norton had done a movie called Under the Gun in Australia, and it was
Okay.
him and Kathy Long, the kickboxing champion, who was in a bunch of movies as
Sure.
well,
Sure.
and my dad, who's the bad guy. My father, Tino Ceberano, plays the bad guy.
Hmm.
And Richard, I actually contributed some ideas for action scenes for the film. Thought the script was really funny, and I had the idea to do a second film, which was basically a remake of an old film by a populist filmmaker called Wong Jing. His film was called The Last Blood, and basically it's like this religious leader is mortally wounded, and he has a very rare blood type. And the heroes have a window of time to get in the blood in time before he dies. And
Hmm.
there are all these cult members from a cult that hates this religious leader who are trying to stop them. So I thought this is a good premise. And you'd have like the bodyguard of the the cult leader, so the bodyguard of the religious leader, who would be a kung fu fighting Asian chick, and you'd have a white guy. Though strangely enough, the first round of it was Richard and Kathy Long. So the bodyguard would not have been ostensibly, Chinese or Asian. And then that went away because, I mean, it was just very hard to get financing for a film with Richard and Kathy, sadly, even though they both
Okay.
were very talented.
Sure.
And so I moved on. I just put it on the shelf of films that I hadn't made yet. And then I had the opportunity to do it again. And I showed it to Michael, and he said, "Yeah, I'd be interested to do it." And initially we thought about doing it with Maggie. And to this day, I'm not quite sure why we didn't, other than she'd gone to Hollywood by this point. She did Mission Impossible, Die Hard, and I think she was doing something else and was not available. And I also think our budget was not. Maybe we couldn't afford her at that time. I think she
Okay.
might have done it if I really pushed the issue, but for whatever reason, I'm not clear in my own mind. I didn't push for Maggie to do it. So we were like, I had Michael on board to star in the movie.
Hmm.
And in the time after Dragon Squad, I mean, Michael's career hadn't really soared in Hollywood. And a lot of the distributors and the salespeople said, "Oh, you shouldn't do a Michael Biehn movie. People don't want to see a Michael Biehn movie. I can get you Dolph Lundgren." And Dolph Lundgren, by the way, can direct films as well.
Sure.
And of course, I'm balancing it, but in me, going back to this Chinese concept of yihei, I promised Michael he was going to star in the movie.
Hmm.
So if I found the money, Michael was going to star in the movie, and I wasn't going to be swayed by, the offer of Dolph Lundgren. And there were some other people thrown out there as well. That did put into my mind the idea that whoever starred in the film might direct it, though.
Okay.
And I'd had a thought in my mind that Michael had been around Jim Cameron and Michael Bay and William Friedkin, and by osmosis would have taken on some directorial knowledge. Don't know that necessarily was true. I think
Mm.
he shot those films. He's a superb actor, very professional, and he would shoot his scenes and go back to his trailer. I don't think he was somebody like Simon Yam, who did 300 films and never had a trailer and he hasn't directed, but he actually directed some scenes on Blood Bond. He could direct blindfolded, Simon. He knows every aspect of filmmaking because he's been on the set
Sure.
all the time. So anyway, so I kind of like initially stuck to my guns. Michael's going to star in the film. And then the second thing was that he was going to I offered him to direct the movie as well. And then he came in, "Oh, I'm gonna have to go rewrite," and he rewrote the film, and then he had to have Jennifer Blanc, who I think was his girlfriend, and now is his wife. She was going to be in the film, and it kind of was became something different because of his involvement.
Okay.
Um, and the biggest change, I think, is I want to do something like The Raid, a full-on slam bang action film,
Sure.
which Michael was perfectly capable of doing all of the gun, fist, and knife stuff you expect from like a Rambo kind of guy.
Hmm.
And the girl we found to be, in the end, to be the female lead, Phoenix Cho, um, was just amazing. She was just how she failed to become a star is probably a podcast unto itself. But we had her in a couple of movies, but she was just one of these incredible women who's so gifted physically. She could do all the action that you could ask, stunning looking. And I think she was developing as an actor. And probably, again, one of my complaints, one of my problems with Michael as a director was I didn't feel he really worked with her to bring her up. I think he just took it, she wasn't experienced enough. And maybe there was a sense of like he didn't want to be upstaged in his own film by this stunning creature. So I would have liked him to really work with her more
Sure.
and the script to be more about their relationship, like the African Queen kind of thing. And we moved away from that, which was a shame. Um, so anyway, so Michael was set to come and direct the film. Now there was a studio at that time in a city called Lam Hoi, Nanhai in China. So there was a studio called Ace Studios, and it was run by this wonderful eccentric guy called Henry Look. And I don't know if you're familiar with the British TV show Fawlty Towers, but Henry was to studio management what Basil Fawlty was to hotel running. I mean, that was a series with John Cleese as in
Okay.
Torquay running a hotel. And Henry was kind of the filmmaking equivalent of that. But he had a facility, he had stages, he had cameras, he had lights, he had all the train set you needed to make a
Sure.
movie. So Michael came over and duly began pre-production and what have you. I think from beginning to end, he was just, and he says this on his podcast, he was really, like frustrated with all of the stuff. I put that down to a phrase my dad used to use, a poor craftsman blames his tools.
Mm.
Because in this instance, Michael came in with decent budget and all of this equipment and
Sure.
really struggled to make something memorable. A
Mm.
year later, I came back with this incredible director called Matthew Veschler, who would later direct Attrition for me with
Oh
Seagal,
yeah, with
and
Seagal, sure.
he directed for like a third or less of the Blood Bond budget, a film called Borderland. Same studio, same
Okay.
equipment, and every shot, every scene is incredible because Mathieu came in with the mindset of a director of like, okay, I've got all the tools I need. Now, what do I squeeze out of the day?
Sure.
And Michael would spend a lot of energy being mad. And actually, during the shoot, he was yelling so loud, it made Christian Bale sound like he was at Sunday school.
I'm gonna fucking kick your fucking ass. You don't shut up for a second, all right? I'm gonna go. Do you want me to go fucking trash your lights?
This is great stuff. I could make a career out of this guy.
And I was worried about the Michael Biehn rant getting out and damaging his reputation and that of the film. So I said to the making of guy, can you give me all that footage? And he goes, oh, no, don't worry about it. Michael came to me at the beginning of the shoot and he says, every time Michael, start yelling, cut the camera. So he's so cool. So we didn't have any Christian Bale material. We got, and then it cuts
Yeah, yeah.
with hours of him go, and then we cut to something. And so, yeah, I mean, he didn't have I don't think he had a very good instincts towards doing a martial arts action film. He kind of downplayed that. And his other big beef, from what I took away from his podcast, was the fact that this film was taken away from him and re-edited without
Oh
his
yeah, he said he wasn't allowed in the
involvement.
editing bay.
Okay, so here's what really happened. He I'm trying to figure out the time frame of this because there's an issue that came up that affected his involvement, but I'm trying to remember the time frame of it. But I would say this, and I have documentation, I think, that backs this up. The cut of the film that played in Hong Kong theaters and the cut of the film that I took to Cannes was what Michael had shot,
Okay.
pretty much. And um, I convinced myself, okay, this is going to work. And I think if it had been Dolph Lundgren in the lead, maybe it would have done because people wanted to buy a Dolph Lundgren film, and even if it was not so great, they might have bought it anyway. But it was a Michael Biehn movie with Phoenix Joe, who was unknown at the time.
Mhm.
So no one went to see it in the theaters, and nobody bought it in Cannes. And I came back from Cannes just shell-shocked. I mean, it was just, I was just so disheartened. You know, this thing hadn't worked. It was the first production of my new company. And Henry, look, who, as I say, was this eccentric, but not a bad person. Now we don't have any kind of relationship now. I don't know why. We never really argued or anything. I just drifted away from working with his studio. I think I'd done as good of a film as could be done at Ace, which was Borderland. And if you want to make that judgment, just look at all the other films that have been made there. Pound of Flesh with Jean-Claude Van Damme. But he's a good, he actually in his heart is a good man. And the strange thing was his right-hand guy, who I think I introduced him to, is a director called Anthony Zito, who, again, up until certain things happened, he was a good friend of mine. And I came back from Cannes and I met them both, if I remember correctly, at Hong Kong railway station. And I was just shell-shocked. You know, nobody had bought the movie. Everybody said, the movie's not that good. There's not enough action. And by the way, you know, why do you think we want to buy a Michael Biehn movie? So I sat down with them and I just said, you know, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And Henry realized that this was the first Ace Studios film that was ever going to be released. Oh, I have to tell you another story, which was during the shooting of Blood Bond. Henry had previously directed a film himself called The Forest, and he paid Michael like a bag of money to shoot a couple of days for this film. And Michael played a guy called Pete who runs a pharmacy, and he had a white coat with Pete's Pharmacy on it. And he shot these couple of days. And you know what the funny thing is? Like, you know, Michael and I, you know, never injured each other by coming to blows, but I think we almost injured each other that day because we were laughing so hard. We were pulling our muscles, our stomach muscles. It was just Michael's a good sport, but Henry was directing him like it was Michael was hanging on the edge of what's meant to be a mine shaft or something. And he said, wiggle your fingers or whatever. Michael was just crying. We're trying not to because you don't want to offend Henry. But that was just the other funny thing. So Henry was a real character. So he used Michael for that and he paid Michael to do it, which was great. Sure. So anyway, there I am in the station, kind of sobbing into my coffee. And to their great credit and to my undying gratitude. See, I'm capable of doing something, I think, David, that's very useful in this business. I can compartmentalize in that I can say, you know, someone like Anthony Zito, even though he behaved despicably later, I just go, in that window of time, he was a good and loyal friend who was there when I needed him. Same with Henry. And I don't retroactively go, you know, because there's this kind of sense of like people rewrite history to reflect where they're at now. Sure. And it's like, no, that's not what happened. And I hear people talk about me. I say, no, that's not what happened. Now you don't like me for whatever reason. But 10 years ago, we did this. That is what happened. And so great credit to Henry and Anthony. And Henry says, you know what? Let's just reshoot the stuff we should have done the first time. And Anthony will direct it. And we'll do it all for free. And I'll give you the studio for free. So what a thing to hear. So I felt really bad about Michael because I'd done my best. I'd stuck by him. People said to replace him as an actor. I didn't do it. Frankly, a few days into directing, I considered replacing him, but I'd given him my word and I thought he might get better. Sure. But I don't know that he did. But we shot the whole film with him as director, edited the film, and he had a cut of the film. And he wrote to me and said, yeah, this looks pretty good. This is my cut of the movie. There'd been this issue relevant to SAG, Screen Actors Guild. And of course, actors in Hong Kong belong to no union. But American actors, when they come and shoot in Hong Kong, I guess they're meant to be working under SAG rules and what have you. And I'm a union guy. I mean, if the Writers Guild or the acting, I've worked with all of the guilds and no problem. The Screen Actors Guild, when Michael came in, he was like, yeah, you know, you have to put everything through SAG or we might have problems and we need this, we need that. So I said, Michael, no problem. You just send me what the SAG provisions are and I'll accommodate them. And he says, oh, I don't know what they are. I said, okay. So I asked his manager. And I think I asked Jennifer, who was kind of his de facto personal manager. She didn't know. Then I spoke to his manager. He said he didn't know. Then I talked to the agency and they were like, we'll get back to you. And they never did. So we kind of shot the whole movie and that was kind of put on hold. Sure. After the film, when he'd gone back to LA, Michael said, I'm not doing any more any more work on this film until you square things with SAG. So at this point, I'm going, now, you might think, okay, that was my responsibility to do. It was. Now, if you, David, came to Hong Kong and I said, by the way, you're going to have to conform to the requirements of the Hong Kong Actors Guild, your question to me would be, fine, Bey, what are they?
Yeah, sure.
And if I said to you, I don't know, you'd be like, then how do I conform to them? And if you asked three other people, they didn't know either, you might be like, well, I don't mind conforming, but you have to tell me what to conform to.
Yeah, yeah.
So I called up the guild and said, I called up SAG and I got a representative and I said, hypothetically, if I had shot a movie starring one of your guild members and I now wanted to retroactively meet the SAG requirements, because I felt I couldn't lie and say it's yet to be shot because it was just so obvious. It'd been to Cannes already. And he goes, and the guy from SAG goes, wait a minute, you've already made the movie. I said, hypothetically, I have. And he goes, well, hypothetically, have you paid the actor all the money he's owed? I said, absolutely. And he goes, then why are you calling me? I said, well, I just felt I should. He says, listen, dude, most of the actors in SAG are not making anything close to a living. And if they go to Hong Kong and make a movie and you give them a bag of money, fine with us. Okay, just for my just for my reference, could you just send me, fax me, that's how long ago it was. Can you fax me what the requirements are so I would know for future reference? Also, I'm thinking, well, I'll just check and see because maybe we already fulfilled all of these requirements and then Michael will be fine to keep working on the movie,
Sure.
re-editing. Which I didn't know that he was going to come back to Hong Kong, but he could certainly have, been a voice in the editing process. So then SAG sent me the list, and basically, I think more than on Dragon Squad, on Blood Bond, we had fulfilled almost all of the requirements. He'd stayed in a nice hotel, airfare. He was the director, so he decided the shooting hours. So it wasn't
Sure.
like Dragon Squad, um, and this and that and the other, and he'd been paid in full and whatever. There was one provision, I don't know if they still have it, where we were meant to put money into a account, a SAG account in LA, which would be the um, estimated his estimated share of the profits from the film.
Hmm,
This
interesting.
was a problem because there was no money left, and after the disaster of his cut of the film being shown in Hong Kong and being sold or not sold in Cannes, there were no profits to share.
Yeah.
So that provision I couldn't meet. I don't know if there's anything else, but at the end, Michael dug his heels in and he says, no, if this isn't under SAG, Jennifer and I cannot participate any further. And that was it. So this whole story of like, we took him out of the editing room. No, he shot the film he wanted to shoot with all the resources that we could throw at him. He did his edit of the film, signed off on it. Nobody wanted to see it. As producer, it was my responsibility to try to somehow put some, and studios do reshoots all the time for the same reason,
Sure.
to make it something people wanted to see. I wanted him to be involved. I wanted him, and the other problem we had, I think some of the ADR isn't him because he wouldn't do it. He basically stepped away because of SAG. Now, at the beginning of the process, if he or his manager had said to me, you need to be SAG compliant and here are the rules,
Yeah,
then
that's
fine.
sure.
I happen to be a white guy producer. I could have been a Chinese dude. And by the way, I don't think any producer in Hong Kong is going to put estimated profit participation for an actor into a bank
Yeah,
account in
that
LA.
seems odd, you know?
Maybe they
Like,
don't do it anymore, but at the time that was one. I remember that was one of the sticking points and whatever. So that was the true story. And then we re-shot a bunch of stuff at the studio. Anthony came on board. We did the action. Phoenix came back and did the action scenes. And in the end, the film, we made some money back with it. It's still around. And I look back and you know what? You only lose if you don't learn some lessons. So in
sure.
my estimation, I was like, that's what happened, and I was surprised to hear it defined differently by Michael when he was ranting and raving. And there was actually an incident. I'm very slow to go on to social media to defend myself or to attack other people. It's not my character. I do know after the film wrapped, he did an interview. And again, this is the earlier stages of social media, so it's not quite as, immediate and all pervasive as it is now. He did an interview with some site and he was just trashing the experience, and the studio was no good and I was no good, and the film had been taken away from him in the editing room, which I mean, yeah, I've explained to you. Yeah, in a sense, yes, that's why. But there are reasons for it, which I just explained.
Sure.
But I was then asked to reply, and I did as measured a reply as I could, and just said he did a good job. He did the best he could. Unfortunately, we had to reshoot stuff for the marketplace, or whatever, whatever, whatever. Didn't mention SAG or anything, of course. And then thought, well, I've been as, as fair as I can be. And then at the end of it, and by the way, on your podcast today, I've been as fair as I can be.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't want
for sure. You gave him credit for
so
things. Yeah.
so then at the end of the and I just said I think I gave him the wrong film to shoot, and I probably didn't give him the support he needed and whatever. And then the first thing, oh, this creepy reply from Bey. And I wrote and I said, and I think I stuck to it. I said, okay, you know what? This is the last time I'm going to get into the basement with you trolls, because I realize now this isn't a dialogue. It's like gladiatorial combat. If I would have said, yeah, he sucks, he couldn't direct traffic, I should have fired him on the second day, you all would have said, how can you disrespect the great Michael Biehn?
Sure.
If I say Michael's a good director and a great guy, and one of those two things is true, and I kind of like should have helped him more, and yada yada. You say, oh, he's being creepy, so you can't win. So I'm not even have the
Not with those
dialogue,
trolls,
and
no.
then now I finally. Well, the weird thing about it was I decided to do my autobiography, and not just, stories of Bey and my exciting life, but kind of lessons in production and actors and how they should. And I think in the course of doing your podcast, I've thrown out a couple of things that I think people might find relevant.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any point in my sitting there going, Bey Logan good, Michael Biehn bad. As if, oh, another funny story. We got this girl to come into the movie. I'm blanking on her name, but anyway, she was a supermodel in Shanghai, and she played a bad girl in the film, and she has a fight at the end with Phoenix. And she'd never been in a movie, never accepted a film before. And when she showed up, she said, oh, I just had to do this film because I couldn't miss the chance to work with Michael Bay. Because somebody had translated our names. It's being directed by Michael and produced by Bey. So that came on her thing.
Hey,
You're doing a
wow.
Michael Bay movie.
Wow.
And boy was she confused. Wait a minute, there's two of you? So it was like double impact. Oh, there's two of them. So that's do you have any questions? I think I covered the ground. I just and I don't like to I want to make one thing I want to make Nixon, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. Um I try not to hold grudges. I mean, some of the great line of Nelson Mandela, holding a grudge is like drinking poison and you expect the other person to die.
Yeah, it
I
doesn't
didn't
work.
hold a grudge for all those years. I felt sorry things hadn't. I remember there was one occasion I was in LA, and me and Elizabeth had lunch with Michael. And again, we laughed so hard we thought we were going to pull something. We always had fun together and laughed a lot together. Sometime after that, Daniel Lee was doing another movie in China, and he wanted Michael back to do a
Okay.
role. And I remember we hadn't had any, I think there was some bad feeling, obviously, about Blood Bond. And so but regardless, gig's a gig. And I messaged, and then Jennifer wrote back to me, and it was just, they just dismissed it out of hand. And I don't know if it was bad feeling towards me, not wanting to go and do another movie in China. And Daniel obviously adored Michael because he wouldn't have anybody else. He was like, no, I don't want, I offered him some other actors. And he was like, no, I even said, if you want a guy, me. And he goes, Bey, I need somebody, but I'm not desperate. I said, okay. So he didn't want me to play the role. So that was that. But that was the last communication that I had with Michael. And the other thing that I found a little bit off-putting was, to me, if this aside, if somebody said to me, yeah, I'd like to do a podcast and I'd like to talk about the experience of Blood Bond, it would be a very different podcast. But I would have called Michael up or tried to and said, do you want to come on with me? Because I think we would just laugh about the fun of making the movie. I
Yeah.
don't think it was a great movie, and obviously the things happened later, but day by day when we made the film, I remember us just falling around I mean, yeah, he would yell and scream sometimes, but we also had a lot of laughter. And in my estimation, still to the end were friends. And that's probably the thing that comes. It's the thing I appreciate from his podcast, and the thing that hurts me is he says we're friends, and if we're friends, why would you come on and talk about me in this way? So that's my feeling on it. And I wish him nothing but well. I have a great life and career. I know he had some more kids with Jennifer, and I wish him a great life and career. And if he's really put out by anything that I've said, he knows where to find me.
Yeah, yeah, it could be a whole kumite after that. But
The Kumite meets the Terminator. So that's that. So you'll probably you'll get Michael Biehn fans writing in and saying, yeah, how poor Michael working with that foul Bey, and he got paid. I mean, the other thing I want to point out, and I mean, you can relate to this, I think, David, as a filmmaker and as a an actor. I think the biggest beef most actors have with most producers is they got ripped off, that they weren't paid, or they were not, all their expenses weren't covered, or they weren't credited. I have to say with Michael that on Dragon Squad and Blood Bond, as far as I'm concerned, I think he wouldn't dispute this. He was paid every dollar that he was promised, and every cost was met. So
yeah,
that
just
that
minus a coffee, but aside from that, he seemed fine.
That's right. I know, and I learned a lesson from it. And I don't. Well, first of all, I blame the PA to some degree, but I have a thing, three in me. If I ask somebody on a movie or even in my office to do something three times, after the third time they don't do it, I do it myself.
Oh, sure.
And then
Yeah.
sometimes they go, "Oh, I was going to do that." I said, "Yeah, you were going to do it for three times. And it didn't happen." And I should have done that with the guy. And that to me is the process of filmmaking or creating in any forum, is that you have these situations and you go away with whatever emotions you have, anger, frustration, and then you go, wait a minute, okay, so what did I learn from, what can I do differently? And that's what I wanted to say to people. You hear my experiences with Dragon Squad, with Blood Bond, and it's like the important thing to me is how you would have played things another way. I think with Blood Bond, I think it was apparent after a few days that Michael was in over his head, but I should have supported him differently and better and figured it out, the equation to collaborate.
Mm.
But that was me at that time as a producer, and now I would know how to deal with it a different way. And I think he did his best. I don't think he came on set every day going, I want to underperform. I think he did his best. I don't think it was the right movie for him. I, the other thing is, like I say, it's not called tell business, it's called show business. So if you tell me you're a good director and you directed a movie and it got taken away and whatever, then if you actually directed a good movie that got, taken out of your hands, then you should be able to direct five more movies.
True.
And I don't know that that's happened with Michael. So that's
Has he
that's the problem.
directed anything else?
I think he did that film. Is it called The Victim? It's like the V, like the aliens V on it. I just saw the
Oh,
poster
yeah.
on his
Okay.
thing. I think those are the only two. He certainly hasn't developed a career as a director. I tell you the irony of this. I think if he took some of the energy he spends, on complaining about stuff into the field of directing, he did show. I felt he had potential, but this was not the right film for him. And Hong Kong and
Okay.
China was not the right situation for him.
Sure.
But I think if he had come back, and I learned from it, and then I did Borderland the next year. And also the other thing I did is I wrote a novel called The Blood Bond, which told the story as I should have told it, because I knew I would otherwise sit in bars for Kingdom Come, going like, kind of, yeah, I did a film with my whatever. But you want to turn and bad energy to good. So I was like, oh, okay, all that frustration, I'm going to write a book. So
Sure.
I had a book called The Blood Bond. And then the next year I did another movie, which is Borderland, and I applied everything I learned on Blood Bond to Borderland. And Borderland,
Nice.
I think I've said to you before, is one of the films I'm proudest of, and if people can find it. It's also called Covert Operation with Sedina Balde, and it's just a great it shows you what could be done at Ace Studios. And the shame is that Henry, bless him, it was quite difficult. It was like pushing up river to make a film of that quality at Ace. And it's a shame, because I think if it had been a more of a filmmaker friendly studio, I don't know it's still active, but it certainly could have been more active and could have made better quality films.
Hmm.
If that was more the case. I found it quite frustrating. And when we finished on Borderland, I don't think there was no storming out the door, but I just felt if you're going to come back, you either want to make a film as good as that or better. And the stuff that was coming in was evidently worse, the stuff that they were doing and the way it was functioning. So I stepped away and went to Vietnam or whatever else. I'm trying to remember the time frame, but I did a bunch of films in China, in other cities, and then went to Vietnam. I'm David. The thing is, for the names, places, incidents, I have a really good memory because I'm a writer. For numbers, I have a really struggle. The years of stuff. People say, "How many years have you been here? And what year was that film?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'm sorry, I've got no idea."